Hi, I'm Gayla Scrivener, ex-corporate girl and now work-from-anywhere adventure seeker. Creating a work-from-anywhere lifestyle isn't without its challenges, but those challenges certainly don't overshadow all the many benefits. What breaks my heart is seeing folks stuck and unhappy in a career and lifestyle when they want more out of life. I believe that we all have the opportunity to create the life of our dreams and earn a living in fun and creative ways to make our dream lifestyle a reality. You too can experience wonderful adventure and freedom as you live life on your own terms. In this weekly podcast, I share experiences when it comes to growing a lifestyle business through guest interviews, content marketing experience and perspectives, virtual leadership lessons, and I'll even throw in some travel adventures. My hope is through all the interviews, the tips, advice, and personal experience, you'll be inspired and motivated to keep going and creating your dream lifestyle. Life's an adventure. There's no time but the present to live life to the fullest. Hi there and welcome to the show. If you're a new listener, welcome. I'm glad you're here. And if you're returning, thanks for following me. I'm glad you're here too. Because today, I'm going to explore the thought of why taking a break from creating your content may be necessary. Now let's face it, consistently creating content is not easy. It takes commitment, it takes time, it takes work. And sometimes it can be an uncomfortable process. Uncomfortable because there seems to be that looming deadline over your head, and when you're busy and unsure what to write and record, that's uncomfortable. I follow pricing expert Paul Klein of Pricing is Positioning podcast. His podcast is fantastic, by the way. I highly recommend it. I'm really excited for him to join me in next week's show, so be sure to tune in. Well, anyway, Paul started his podcast in 2019 and was very consistent with it. I looked forward to his weekly show. I was hooked. I even reached out to him a few times via email. Then, last summer, I noticed that there were a few weeks that I didn't see a new podcast episode pop up in my iTunes. Then, when his post on December 17th published and appeared on my iTunes feed, I was delighted to see that he was back. The episode title was Why Pausing This Podcast Was Dumb But Necessary. I found a lot of value in the podcast. It's certainly a great listen to gain perspective and feel comfortable with giving yourself some grace. And after I listened to the podcast, I reached out to Paul because I said, hey, may I use you as an example for my podcast and my listeners? And he said, sure, that would be great. So my perspective on his message on that podcast episode, why pausing this podcast was dumb but necessary, the link is going to be in the show notes, so I highly recommend that you listen to it and listen to all the back episodes. And there's no doubt about it, whether you're publishing a blog, producing a video, or a podcast, there's a fair amount of work involved, and sometimes the pressure of getting it all done in conjunction with everything else that's going on in your life can be just way too much to bear. Time is most definitely a fixed asset. Life happenings warrant priorities to be rearranged so that transition can occur. First, my biggest takeaway from this particular episode of Paul's podcast was, sometimes something has to give. We work hard to create the freedom and margin that a lifestyle business brings. Those are the very reasons we leave corporate, right? We want more freedom and more margin, so we leave the corporate prison. Prison may be too strong of a word, but that's how I viewed it toward the end of my corporate life. So prison's the word that I'm going to choose. We leave a work environment that we felt was stifling, only to find ourselves creating a new prison for ourselves in the hustle of building an online business. There's more to life than only work. Something has to give. And the beauty of it is that we have the control over what we want or need to let go of for a period of time or even forever. My second biggest takeaway was even though consistency when it comes to producing a show is important, it is perfectly okay to stop and start again on occasion. That is such a great lesson for all of us to remember. I remind my clients of that and also must remind myself on occasion. We should never ever beat ourselves up for falling short on the habit of consistently producing content. As with any habit, if we fall off the wagon, we can always get back on. Whether your core piece of content may be a blog, a video, or podcast, all the effort that goes into a consistent publication is most definitely work. There's going to be some uncomfortable pressure to get into the habit of consistently publishing. Now, Paul made the reference that podcasting is lonely. And boy, he speaks the truth. You never know who's listening and if what you're saying even makes a positive difference. Unlike speaking in front of an audience or leading a workshop or even a Zoom call, you can't gauge the audience's reaction and adjust, if needed, to make the presentation more meaningful. You're all alone. It's just you and your microphone. Then, when you share the episode, there seems to not be much engagement. At least that's usually what's on our minds. We don't see the engagement that maybe we perceive should happen. And the thing about blogs, podcasts, or video production, it's, for the most part, a one-way communication path. Sometimes we never know the help we give folks. Sometimes we never know how many times someone may mention our name or refer to something that we've published. But here's the thing, our published communications, it's a ripple that only over time we will see the effect. I see often, and by the way, I've experienced it myself, that when we first start to publish on a regular schedule, like a blog or podcast or video, there may be some internal resistance to keep up with the schedule. And there are so many things that seem to be high priority. And maybe they are, but for all of us to grow our small business brand, the foundation of our marketing has to be our core piece of content. If you don't have that, if you don't have a marketing plan, well, actually, if you don't implement that marketing plan, then your business will either remain stagnant or wither away to nothing. A plan without action doesn't ever produce results. So if you're starting out and starting and stopping your core piece of content because something else of importance bubbles up to the surface, I encourage you to push through and remain committed to your core piece of content. Have that be your highest priority, because in the long run, you will see results. And what I've learned from Paul's podcast episode was that he was and is dedicated to his core piece of content, his podcast. He stuck with it for more than a year, and he got through the hump and challenges of being new to podcasting. He made it a habit. He's committed. He knows that it's important for his business growth. But then there comes a period of time where focus needed to be elsewhere. So he put his podcasting to a pause. No one can decide for you what your priorities should be. Only you can decide where you will want and should focus your attention. Consistency in producing your core piece of content matters in the growth of your business. Staying consistent isn't always easy. Ingraining the routine, that habit, is sometimes difficult. And if you haven't started your core piece of content, if you haven't started your blog or your podcast or your video, I'm not saying that you have to do all three. Right here, I'm saying pick one and be consistent with it. I encourage you to begin. It's not going to get done on its own. It doesn't have to be perfect or polished. What you're doing is exercising the muscle of habit, of consistency. The process will evolve and get better over time. Don't give up because you don't think anyone's listening. Remember, it takes time, continual practice, and determination to build meaningful relationships in growing your tribe to build a prosperous online business. Now, if you're already publishing, awesome! I love it. If you're struggling with that consistency part of it, hang in there. Continue to find ways to streamline the process for yourself. Continue to challenge yourself to publish. Celebrate when you have that consistency going, but don't beat yourself up if you miss a week. But then, if stuff happens in life, like it will, and you need to reevaluate your priorities and pause your content, don't beat yourself up about it. Be confident with your decision. One last note of the lesson learned from Paul's episode. He said that he should have done an episode that announced his pause and not left his audience hanging. That's very, very great advice. For me, I know if I'd pause for a while this podcast, I probably wouldn't have thought of making an official announcement. Mainly because I would have had good intentions of publishing the following week. And if I miss 1 week, then 2 weeks, then 3 weeks, well, then I think, oh, well, it's too late to say anything, right? But then again, for me, if I do miss 1, then 2, then 3 weeks, my good intentions in recording that next episode is really masking the indecision of my priorities. I'm all over the place of what to focus my time on, which will lead to some things dropping off. And if I dropped off on my consistency with the podcast, I need to make the decision of moving it away from good intentions and just making a decision. I love Paul's insight into the importance of making a pause announcement. That means the decision has been made, you're not depending on those good intentions, and you can then place your entire focus on what you need to do. Thanks, Paul, for being one of my virtual mentors, and check out his Pricing is Positioning podcast. You'll find links in the show notes. Oh, better yet, be sure to tune in to next week's show when Paul joins me. He'll share some great advice. No, I'm going to say fantastic advice on pricing your services. So if you haven't already done so, I'd be honored if you'd subscribe in your favorite podcast player to this show. You'll be notified as soon as a new episode releases. If you are on my mailing list, you'll get notifications on Friday via email. But this year, I want to tell you, I'm planning on some bonus travel adventure episodes where they won't be shared via email. So the only way that you'll hear about these travel antics that Robert and I will have will be only through subscribing to this channel. Now, thanks for joining me today. I'd love to be introduced to your content and connect with you. Follow me on Instagram and be sure to send me a direct message introducing yourself. Let me know that you're sending me this note after listening to this episode. And if you'd rather follow on Facebook or LinkedIn, send me direct messages there. I get those too. Tell me that you're reaching out and introducing yourself based on listening to this episode. All my contact links are right down here in the show notes. I would love to know how I can connect with you and follow your content, follow your blog, your podcast, your video series. Or if you're wanting to start something like that, what are your ideas? I'd love to hear from you. Again, thanks for listening. And until next time, have a fantastic week.